How to Make It Through These Chaotic Transitional Times. Remembering the Big Picture by Vidya Fraser. If you're like a lot of people these days, you're probably experiencing periods of anxiety, confusion, and disorientation, in between occasional periods of elation and excitement, a rather unstable and unpredictable state of being. Not that this is necessarily new, but maybe now it's just gotten even more so than ever before. There's just so much swirling around in the news these days. It's hard to keep track of all that's happening. And it's hard also to even know if what you're reading or hearing actually is happening with all the mis, dis, and malinformation out there. And then, of course, there's also all the intense stuff that may be happening in your personal life as well. Well, if any of this is happening for you, it actually makes sense because here we are, at long last, heading into the deeply chaotic core of what's been called the transitional times, the most tumultuous times before the shift into 5D will be happening. And because the energies out there are so charged with anxiety, confusion, and division, it is easy to get caught up in all the information blowing through social media sites, the plethora of news streaming out of internet podcasts, as well as on mainstream news, if you're still watching that. And it can really get difficult to stay calm, centered, and grounded. The big picture. And so it's easy to forget what I call the big picture of what is currently happening with humanity and the earth, which, if you can keep it in mind, is something that can really bring in a sense of calm and relaxation by giving you perspective on all that's happening. This big picture includes a gigantic shift into a much higher frequency of consciousness that is on the horizon for humanity at this point. A massive revolution of awakening that is occurring in the midst of the collapse of worldwide power structures. It is something you're probably aware of if you're reading this, but it maybe tends to remain in the back of your mind as all the myriad of individual current events, especially all that's transpired around the recent U.S. election, continue to bombard you. But remembering this big picture is an important key to keeping sane. First of all, because you can see the reason for the tumultuous stuff that is currently happening. And secondly, because you can remember that this is just a temporary time period we're all in, and that it will be leading to a momentous shift of consciousness happening to humanity, which will eventually evolve into a time on Earth that's been referred to as a golden age. So this is what I'm going to focus on here. A description of what exactly this big picture is and how it can help to keep you calm and sane if you can keep it in mind. Hopefully, in doing this, you'll be able to see that even all the stuff about the current election and the wars and everything else that are going on in the world are really just kind of small events when you consider this much bigger picture that's happening. So I'm going to start out describing in general what the big picture of this shift is and how it's been predicted throughout the ages for these times we're now in. Then I'll go into the history of the planet and humanity since the takeover by dark forces many thousands of years ago. And then finally, I'll give you a description of what the actual shift, or sometimes called the solar flash, will probably look like for us when it happens. Like I say, this will probably be a review, especially if you've followed my blogs and podcasts for some time. I've been reporting on this subject for almost 20 years now. And of course, there are now countless other reports and descriptions of various aspects of the big picture that are available to watch or listen to from a number of other people as well. So, most of what I'll be describing here may not be new to you, but hopefully it'll be a good review and reminder And of course, some of it may be different from what you think you understand, especially in certain details. But I will offer you the story from my point of view, attempting to be as accurate and inclusive as I can be. So that you know, I am basing this story on many years of research of ancient texts, on written and verbal teachings of certain spiritual teachers, reports of a number of whistleblowers in recent years, and also on my own personal inner guidance. So hopefully it'll be helpful in bringing in some calm and sanity for you. What exactly is the big picture? So let me start in generally describing this big picture. What is it exactly? Essentially, the big picture is that we are now living in truly momentous and exciting times for humanity, because we are about to be released into a state of freedom, abundance, and peace that humanity has not known for many thousands of years. It's the story of a huge spiritual battle for the earth and for humanity that's gone on for eons of time and is now about to reach its climax, because the earth and humanity are about to make a gigantic shift into an entirely new reality that's been called the fifth dimension. What is this shift? So what is this shift? Is that humanity is soon going to be making? Throughout the ages, there have been countless prophecies and predictions made in spiritual texts from various traditions across the world about how humanity would be headed toward a golden age during this time period we're now in. This age has been described as one in which there would be no more war, corruption, poverty, or famine, and people would basically be living together, guided by love, compassion, unity, and peace. Many of these sources also describe a type of huge solar event that would be occurring to help create this new age. Also, significantly, within hundreds of indigenous tribes across the world, these same stories about this shift coming up in our near future have been passed on, generation after generation, for hundreds of years. In many of these accounts, there is a reference to a cycle of approximately 26,000 years in which the Earth and humanity have always experienced this shift into a higher frequency. This is when the Earth enters a particular part of the galaxy in which very high frequencies flood anything that comes into it, dramatically raising the frequency of everything and everyone on it. And it's into this part of the galaxy that the Earth has recently entered. In addition, in all of the sources, there is always a reference to what has been called the transitional times that happen before the shift is about to occur, in which extreme chaos breaks out across the planet. The dimensional paradigm. All of this is described really well in the dimensional paradigm, the one that explains that we are soon to be shifting into a higher dimension called 5D. And if you're new to this information, it's important to understand that 5D isn't a place. What it is a reality structure created by a particular consciousness, a certain frequency. All dimensions are. All dimensions are where particular things and experiences exist and function in particular ways based on the frequency that's created that reality. So 5D is a reality in which a much higher frequency exists, which means certain new high frequency experiences are possible. Everything functions in a much more coherent way, and the humans who will be ascending into this reality will be living in a much higher consciousness. And therefore, for all those headed there, this involves a process of reawakening to themselves as extremely powerful multidimensional beings. I say reawakening because we are inherently powerful beings who have been dumbed down to forget who we really are by forces very hostile to humanity, which is something I'll go into a bit later. But first, let me explain some other things about this shift we're going to be making. First, as I understand it, it was back in 2012 that a new timeline suddenly appeared in our 3D reality that was headed toward a shift into a 5D reality. At the same time, a portal opened for the Earth and all of humanity to enter into the 4D reality. And we have been passing through that reality ever since. Now, that's where what's different about 4D from 3D and 5D is that it can be described more as a thought realm or a consciousness realm. It has been a reality in which the veil into invisible realms has really been thinning. Truth and spiritual understanding have become much more available, and awakening has been occurring for many, many people during this time period since 2012. At this point, many of us are very near the shift into 5D in our consciousness and are kind of slipping in and out of it. There's no exact borderline between 4D and 5D. There's more of a blending between the two realities at this point. You can kind of be experiencing a sense of 5D in your consciousness while your body is still functioning in 3D. This is part of what can be causing people confusion, instability, and disorientation during these times. At any rate, the only thing to understand about this shift is that not everyone alive now on the planet is headed toward 5D. Not everyone is prepared for this magnitude of shift in consciousness. This is basically a decision that is made on the soul level. Only those who have reached the level of evolution necessary will be able to make the shift into 5D. But the thing to understand about this is that those who are not headed for 5D are evidently also going to be entering into a much better reality when the Earth makes its shift. They will be going into another 4D reality, but it will be one that is not controlled by hostile forces like the one we've been living in here. So this new reality will be much easier and more comfortable for them to live in than this one has been, and also one in which it will be much easier to evolve into higher consciousness. Planetary history. So that's just a brief overview of the shift that we're now rather quickly approaching. But for greater understanding about humanity's journey toward this point now, let me go into humanity's history, a version of history that is becoming known to increasing numbers of people now, but one that has been hidden from us for many thousands of years. This is a story of which there are a variety of versions. The whole subject is both complicated and intense, but essentially it is a story, as I've said, which involves a battle for the planet Earth and humanity, which is now coming to a climax. It's a story about a deep darkness, about control, manipulation, and corruption that has existed on planet Earth for many thousands of years, but is just now, during these times, coming to the surface to be seen and known, and can therefore finally be dealt with. I'm going to give a kind of general version of this story here, including all I can in this one document. So I've been leaving out a lot of details that whistleblowers from the secret space program and three-letter agencies have revealed over recent years, along with stories from many other sources. But here is a brief and general picture of it all. Long, long ago, in the very early days on the planet, there lived a developing race we know today as humanity. During those times, many highly advanced galactic races visited Earth and took an interest in humanity. Some of them were very benevolent, wanting to assist this race, and some were not. But many of them decided to use their advanced technology to tinker with humanity's DNA, giving human bodies parts of themselves. And as a result, it's important to understand that we today are all hybrid beings, with mostly original human DNA in our bodies, but also with a variety of DNA from other galactic races as well. The Archons. At any rate, at one point, a certain very powerful race came along, an extremely technologically advanced race that are now referred to as the Archons. And these beings were not benevolent toward the human race, they were beings from another universe, one created and run by another source, not the source that created humanity and all else that was originally in this universe. This idea may be new to you and hard to take in, but think about it. Hasn't it always kind of puzzled you that evil exists in our world? If God or Source is all loving, and we've all been taught, why has this God or Source allowed all the horrendous things that occur on this planet? This isn't a subject I'm going to go into here, but if this is new for you, I suggest you just consider it as a possible truth, that there are beings here in this universe and on this planet who were not created by the same source as has created humanity. But to get back to my story about these archons, what they realized was that these human beings had something that they didn't, and it was something they wanted, something powerful and creative, which is what we might call the divine spark within us. They were puzzled by it, but saw the power of it. And so they began devising a number of different ways to try to capture it for themselves. They realized it was going to be a long game, but that didn't matter. They just had to figure out how to weaken humans and dumb them down first, so they could study this thing and eventually get it for themselves. Meanwhile, other races, also hostile to humanity and also greedy for other things they found on planet Earth, came along, such as the reptilians, the Anunnaki, and many other races you probably heard of. And they began working with the archons to weaken humanity and try to take control over them. Dark family lineages. In their attempts to do this, some of these dark beings began mating with humans in order to create certain family lineages who would hold a lot of their DNA and hopefully eventually help them to take over the human race. Some of the names that have been given these families are the Illuminati, the Black Nobility, the Shadow Controllers, and the Khazarian Mafia. These are the people today who live deep in the shadows. Their identities are basically unknown to the public, but they are the ones really pulling the strings in the background, behind all the dark events taking place on the planet today. But then there are also other members of these families who are more known to us, and these are the ones who've been called the cabal or the deep state. These are the people who are part of such organizations and groups as the WEF, the WHO, the BIS, the Vatican, the CDC, HARP, the three-letter agencies, global banks, the dark military, the secret space program, big pharma, big ag, etc., etc. Very importantly, a lot of our world leaders are also part of these dark Illuminati families, and many of them who are not have been bribed and blackmailed by these families to make sure they go along with their dark agendas. The Illuminati religion. But a very important thing to know about these families, something that was not well known until recent years when disclosure began happening, is that they fervently practice a particular religion in which they worship the figure humanity is called Satan. And their main belief is that they are a superior race on this planet. They own the earth, and most of humanity is here to simply serve them. This is a main tenet of this religion, and it explains a lot. And because humanity began multiplying so much over the centuries, they began over many thousands of years doing a number of things in order to weaken and kill people. They have created wars for humans to fight while they financed both sides. They've created numerous pandemics. This last one wasn't the first. They've engaged in both drug and human trafficking. They've created harmful technologies such as 5G, CERN, and HARP, and they've engaged in sinister clandestine programs such as MK Ultra. All of this, aside from killing people, was to create trauma and fear in us in order to instill in us a desire and need for safety. This would then lead to our willingness to obey their orders, which were purported to keep us safe. We have, of course, seen this scenario play out really clearly in the last few years. And then, of course, you can really go down the rabbit hole around what the actual religious practices of these families are, and I hesitate to clearly name these things because these practices are so dark. But let me just say that they do include truly horrendous acts with children. Now, something interesting is that the man known as Cobra, someone who describes himself as a Pleiadian contactee and who works with the galactic light forces and also the Human White Hat Alliance, says that the being known as Satan is now gone, that the galactic light forces took him out a couple of years ago. They were evidently able to capture this being and destroy him. Other sources have said similar things. They also say that his followers ever since have therefore been floundering without his support and leadership. Other ways the dark forces have controlled humanity. However, meanwhile, what the Archons and their buddies originally set up is still kind of in place. First of all, it is said by many different sources, including whistleblowers now, that with their incredibly advanced technology, they created a simulation of reality for humanity to live in, a false matrix that looks real and seems real, but it's actually not. They say that there is an organic universe out there that humanity has been locked out of for thousands of years. Not exactly like what was shown in the movie The Matrix, but it works similarly to keep humanity locked into the control of the dark forces. And along with this false matrix, these beings are initially created a quarantine barrier around the Earth so that positive galactic beings could no longer come onto this planet anymore. In addition, very importantly, they used their technology to further control humanity through what Cobra has called implants that were inserted into the etheric body of humanity. One of them he calls the primary implant, which was inserted into the brain and which is what humans have called the inner critic. This is a technology that consistently sends programming to our brains designed to instill guilt, shame, self-doubt, blame, and fear in us. In other words, this isn't something that's natural in us. It's not at all a benevolent aspect of our consciousness. It's ancient AI technology that was inserted into our brains to keep us weak. Another important implant, he says, was inserted in the solar plexus. It's designed to create difficulty in relationships between men and women. And then there's Jacqueline Hobbs, who's another interesting source about all this kind of information. She describes this technology somewhat differently, referring to it as the slave self, a technology that is intertwined with our DNA, designed to cause it to function at a much lower frequency. In essence, it causes us to be cut off from our full source connection, dumb us down, weaken us, and be caught in the illusion that we are much smaller and weaker beings than we actually are. At any rate, on top of all this, the Archons and their friends also hijacked the Earth grid so that it would broadcast frequencies that further create weakness in humans by creating a sense of division, hatred, blame, and war in them. And then, of course, in addition, the dark forces have infiltrated all of humanity's institutions, including all religions and even many of the New Age teachings, to keep us weak and believing we are inherently flawed beings who need to keep fixing and improving ourselves, constantly doing healing work in order to be good and responsible spiritual beings. Part of how they ensured this was to set up the karmic wheel to keep us recycling over and over again, lifetime after lifetime, each time essentially forgetting what we've already learned and understood. that did this also so humanity would continue to suffer and provide them with what they evidently thrive on, the energetic substance that's been called loosh. They even set up what's been called the soul trap, the beautiful light that is seen when someone drops the body. It is said that it is this light that lures them back onto the karmic wheel to reincarnate again. David Icke is someone who describes this phenomenon well. Now, I really apologize if you are new to this, because it does sound so negative and frightening, but it really needs to be understood at this point what humanity has been up against and what is at stake during these times. Awakening about all these things humanity has suffered does not need to happen in order to be able to shift into the much higher frequency of 5D. People can't just do the spiritual bypass with this anymore. Good news. But I also want to say that there is now very good news about all this too, and that is that a lot of all this ancient technology is now beginning to fail. And this is essentially due to the fact that the Earth is rising very quickly in frequency and humanity is waking up. So all they've created is now collapsing. And these beings and all the dark nobility families and all the deep state players know now that they're losing the battle. So all they can do at this point is try to create havoc everywhere and kill off as much of humanity as possible through wars, pandemics, poisoning our food, water, and skies, and controlling us with many forms of AI and broadcasting frequencies such as 5G, HARP, and the Earth grid. And even though just recently a lot of all this has come out, at least in the alternative news, it may be that we still have some even greater challenges ahead of us before the shift actually happens, such as both political and economic collapse in the world. It's hard to say if these events will have to happen before the shift can take place. Time will tell. But no matter what, we need to remember that it's too late for those who have caused all this chaos and death, because the earth and a great number of souls now on the planet are evidently going to be shifting into a 5D reality sometime soon, and none of these beings or what they've created will be going with us. What exactly will happen when the shift occurs? So that's the brief history of humanity as a controlled species through to these times we're now in. Now let me describe what exactly is supposed to happen when the shift occurs. But first, I must make a caveat here. Although many sources, as I've said, have described what I'm about to describe here, a sudden solar event that will have a huge impact on the entire Earth and everything on it, including all of humanity, not all sources who describe the new Earth we're shifting toward include this solar event. So it may be a matter of different possible timelines that now exist, or who knows what. But since many credible sources do include this solar event that will help to create the huge shift in consciousness, I will describe what is generally described about it, so that we can be prepared for it in case it does happen. The solar flash. According to these sources, essentially, what will happen is a huge solar event, an enormously powerful coronal mass ejection, CME, will be shooting out from the great central sun and then through our sun, monumentally impacting the entire Earth and all of humanity, as well as everything else in the solar system. Cobra has called this the event. He's posting about it since 2012. And there are others such as Kerry Kay, David Wilcock, and Ishmael Perez, since then, who have referred to it as the solar flash. There are various theories about what exactly will happen when this huge CME occurs. According to the reports based on ancient texts describing it, it will bring on a great awakening through the extremely high frequencies it will carry. For those who are ready for this, this may well mean they will initially just fall into a state of bliss for a while. However, for those who are not ready, it may be really difficult, at least initially, and it might really freak them out. This is especially true because the other huge thing that will evidently be occurring with this solar flash is that all technology across the planet will be blown out, including all the satellites around the Earth. This, of course, will cause huge chaos and probable panic. However, according to some sources, there will be calming reports given through the Emergency Broadcast System, the EBS, a system designed to completely bypass the mainstream media and will also appear on everyone's phone and computer. The broadcasts will tell people what's actually happening and not to panic. There have been many reports by whistleblowers over the years about this EBS, that it is evidently already prepared to go when the time comes. The broadcasts will reportedly also explain something else that will be occurring at this point, the long-awaited mass arrests, along with huge disclosure with the truth about all the deep state agendas that have been playing out. It's not clear, however, about the timing of these arrests. They may also start somewhat before the event occurs. At any rate, all this will likely create increased chaos for a while, especially if most people are not ready for it. So there will be people flipping out and maybe a number of deaths also occurring. Now, there have also been reports for some sources that the solar flash won't just be a one-time huge event. It will likely be more of a gradual type of event that happens over a greater period of time. So there's not a lot of consensus on this, but generally it's agreed that this type of sun event will definitely be involved. The good news about the solar flash. But what's important to focus on about all this is the incredible sense of freedom and peace the solar flash, in whatever form it comes, is going to bring us. It will be clearing out all the corruption that is currently still in control on the planet, as well as taking down the unseen technology that has been broadcasting frequencies to weaken us. It will also evidently clear away the damage to the environment that humanity has created for so many centuries. And perhaps most importantly, it will bring great abundance. And according to some sources, it will bring 1,000 years of peace, harmony, and balance to humanity. In addition, it will be the beginning of a whole new age on Earth. The Earth will finally be running on such a high frequency that other benevolent galactic races will be comfortable enough to land here at long last and begin assisting us to create the new Earth. And humanity will finally be invited into joining a galactic federation. If you've never heard any of this before, it may all sound like a pie-in-the-sky type of fantasy, and this is understandable. And yet, as I described earlier, there are many sources throughout history that have pointed to this new age of freedom that humanity would be experiencing during these times we're now in, especially once Pluto would be shifting into Aquarius, which it recently did on November 19. Shifting into 5D. But what about the shift into 5D when this all happens? Will everyone here at that point just make the shift at the time of the flash? Well, according to Cobra, initially not everyone. Just one group that will be prepared to do so. But there will be another group, maybe two more, that will ascend a year or so later. David Wilcock and his sources say something similar. However, Carrie Kay says that everyone still alive at the time of the flash will shift into 5D at that point. So who knows for sure? At some point, we will see how it all happens. The big question, when? But meanwhile, the big question most people have, of course, is when is this flash going to happen? And the answer is that it does seem as if it may be happening soon. Most people reporting on it do say that it can't be precisely predicted. It could be tomorrow. It could be 2040. The exact timing depends on too many factors. However, Cobra has been a little more specific. At one point, he said it had to happen by spring of 2025, mainly because it has to happen when the sun is in solar maximum. And this is already happening now. We're in it. And it will probably be lasting through the first part of 2025. He also said that smaller CMAs would already be occurring, getting stronger and stronger as a prelude to the event, soon before the big one would happen. And if you've been following this, you know that we have already been experiencing very powerful CMEs lately. David Wilcock has also said his sources indicate it will probably be happening next year before Labor Day. Most recently, Cobra has stated that the light forces can't hold it off much longer. They evidently have some kind of power to hold it off to a certain extent, and they're wanting to wait for as many people as possible to wake up so they are able to make the shift into 5D. He indicates that these galactic light forces are currently working together with the Human White Hat Alliance to assist the population to be as ready as possible for it. One huge thing he says these forces accomplished a few months back was getting hold of a very powerful technology the dark forces have been using against humanity for thousands of years, technology they call the lurker. This is technology that has been broadcasting negative frequencies to those inner critic implants within us to keep them going within our brains. And since last August, the light forces have evidently been slowly turning this technology off. If you check, you might notice that irritating and destructive voice inside your head has been somewhat weaker and quieter lately. Recent news. At any rate, Cobra has also stated that the light forces are now focusing on stopping the physical wars. There seem to be a number of different reports about what is happening at this point with both of the major wars, but efforts do seem to be finally occurring toward bringing peace. Time will tell how it will all pan out or how long it will take, because what seems true is that we are probably still now headed into perhaps the most chaotic period of these transitional times before the shift is going to occur. So we need to be prepared physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually just in case. I am shortly going to come out with another ebook on this subject, focusing on how we can prepare ourselves to both make it through these coming times and also be ready for the huge shift that may well be occurring in our near future. So, if you have felt a resonance with what I have presented here and found this ebook helpful, you may wish to watch for that one as well when I post it. Meanwhile, do your best to keep the big picture in mind and experience the excitement of these extraordinary times we're living through, and keep remembering the shift that is perhaps just ahead of us at this point. As souls, we are now on a fast track in evolution. What a gift it is to be here. For now, I send all of you fellow light workers and light warriors much, much love.